What's going on out there in I was about to say Facebook world. What's going on out there in YouTube land, baby? I'm so used to being on Facebook Live and stuff. That's why I'm trying to build up my YouTube channel right now. And welcome to A Squared Visual Media channel right here on YouTube. A Squared Visual Media is the official visual and photography brand for May Entertainment, which is the official entertainment division of the May Corporation USA, where we're giving you business in its fullness. And many people also know me from my other company, which is, of course, Meat Productions, which is an LGBT-based company. But anyway, our business does a lot of services, provides a lot of consulting, professional and business solutions to a lot of target market demographics, the Christian community, the LGBT market, the small business market, and some other markets as well. So we do services. We're like a one-stop shop for businesses, and that provides services in those particular target market and demographics. So I just wanted to give her that little plug and everything like that for those people that need any of our visual services or music services. Feel free to check us out at okimdesigns.com to look at our 24-year portfolio, or at least the condensed version of our 24 years of our graphic and web design services and videography services and photography services. So check that out. This February 10th marked 24 years of me being in entrepreneurship. That was my founder's day. So kudos to me. But anyway, I'm glad that you all have been able to tune in to me right now. I want to talk about something that really was brought to my attention by way of doing other media research. Speaking of media, come June of this year, summer of this year, let me put it like that, will mark 10 years of me being in media, both with our online radio shows and now with our online video channel on YouTube, as well as what we do on Facebook Live. So, once again, we'll be doing something to commemorate that coming this summer, but we're going to start back our broadcast of some of our online radio shows. One in particular, which is our number one, very first syndicated radio show, Gospel Music from the Old School, where we play nothing but the very best in classic gospel hits, mostly starting from the 70s on down. Sometimes we touch into the 50s and the 60s, but we mostly cover the mid 70s on down. And because I was born in 1971, so most of the music that I remember growing up at is like really from like the mid 70s on down. So, but we're going to be bringing gospel music from the old school back because we're already doing research now. I want to give a happy 50th anniversary shout out to Malaco Records. I think their anniversary started last year. It's rolling into this year, and they're celebrating 50 years of their label. And now that Malaco has actually is now distributing another historic label, Savoy Records. For those people that don't know the history of Savoy Records, it started out as an old jazz label, jazz and blues label, going back to what the 40s and stuff. Was known as it was known as Savoy Records overall. And then once they added the gospel aspect in the 50s and the 60s, and I think by the time the 70s came, that's when Savoy, the jazz part, split. They split Savoy Records in two halves. It became Savoy Jazz, and then Savoy Records Incorporated, which is known to be, the number one gospel label in the world. And so I want to give a shout out to the memory of the late Fred Mendelsohn, who was the executive producer of Savoy Records for like 40 plus years before he passed. And then I also want to give a shout out to the current president and executive producer of Savoy Records, the legendary Reverend Milton Bigham. And he's been with Savoy Records since the late 70s. And like what, 78, 79, going into the 80s. So, I want to give him an actual shout out and congratulations on being the historic legend that you are. That's if he sees this. But to all of the people who are in the gospel music industry now that's probably viewing this, and to some of my supporters and followers who are big fans of gospel music, want to talk to you about the situation that's going on with the Grammys. I know Smokie Norful, let me make sure I get his name correct, posted a comment about the current situation as far as with the Grammys, and he made some excellent points. He did two comments, by the way, and it was brought to my attention by way of some other vloggers on YouTube that talked about this situation. Lauren Lynn, want to give her a shout out. I think she was the first one that I saw this from. And me being a big fan of gospel music, growing up, grew up in the church, and also at one point I consider myself a gospel historian. Due to the fact that when I was a senior in high school, I did a Black History project on gospel music, and I actually it was part of a Black History exhibit, and I actually got an A plus, and a blue ribbon for my display of the history of gospel music because I talked about Thomas A. Dorsey and Mahalia Jackson and some of the members of the Caravans and stuff like that, Reverend James Cleveland and stuff. So it was just very awesome, that I actually, won that, and that was part of my great to graduate from high school. So, but anyway, been a big fan of gospel music growing up, and when I had no idea that the Grammys had decreased the categories of nominations for gospel music. They decreased them to two: Best Gospel Album and Best Gospel Performance slash Song. And I'm like, I'm more upset at the people, not just at the Grammys, but many of the members of the Grammys who represent gospel. My point was, how could you all let this happen? Because me knowing about the history of gospel music as an art form being recognized the way it was supposed to, and the long road that it took for gospel music to be recognized when it came to these secular outlets, especially as it relates to the Grammys. It took years for gospel music to finally be recognized on the same level as some of the other secular outlets. And I really don't like using that word secular because there's really nothing secular to me about music. Music is music. It depends on who's producing it or presenting it that makes it good or evil. So, but when it comes to like the mainstream commercial gospel, commercial categories in music and American popular music culture, gospel music deserves that same type of exposure, because without gospel music, American popular music would not be. Many of the legends of American popular music got their start from in the church. So, I mean, the list goes down. The late Queen of Soul, Aretha Franklin, whose best-selling album was Amazing Grace. And for those people that don't know, thanks to the Franklin family, they're finally going to release the film recording of Aretha Franklin's Amazing Grace. For those people that don't know, they filmed Aretha Franklin's Amazing Grace recording with the late king of gospel music, Reverend James Cleveland, and the legendary Southern California Community Choir. That's finally going to be released in theaters this year, and they did submit it for Oscar consideration. So we don't know if it's going to be nominated for Best Documentary at the Oscars this year. So please stay tuned, and please stay tuned for that, because that would be awesome. They did some prior screenings at some of the festivals that are responsible for Oscar consideration on November fall of last year. So kudos to the Franklin family and to the producers that made it possible for getting those film archives from Warner Brothers, because that film had been sitting on the shelves for about 40 years, and the original filmmaker, they was originally planned to release the film of Amazing Grace along with the album back in the 70s, 1972, going into 73. They was going to release the film. It was going to coincide with the release of the album. But due to the things that was going on in the film division of Warner Brothers, and with what was going on with technical difficulties as it relates with a lot of the sound did not sync with the video or the film footage. And technology wasn't as advanced back then to kind of correct that like it is now. So for those people that want to find out more information about the film release of Aretha Franklin's #1 best-selling album of all time, and the #1 best-selling gospel album of all time, Amazing Grace, the documentary, the actual concert filming of Amazing Grace being released, which is a historic document, a historic film document. Please just do your research on Google. Just look up Aretha Franklin's Amazing Grace documentary or Amazing Grace film, Aretha Franklin's Amazing Grace film, and you'll find out information about that and see the interviews that the producers and the Franklin family has done concerning that. But getting back to Smokie Norful's comments, I'm very disappointed Because at first, when Smokie Norful made his comments, and he gave shout out to the other people that were nominated in that category, because of course, Tori Kelly, who's a new pop gospel artist, won both categories, and of course, Tori Kelly's album was produced by Kirk Franklin, and so he gave some constructive criticism, but he let the other nominees in that category, who was Jonathan McReynolds, uh, uh, Jacqueline Carr, and the Walls Group, to name a few, because I think there was about three others. I think it was a total of 6 or 7 nominees in those small 2 categories. I was so shocked. I mean, to kind of put aside what Smokey was talking about, I was so shocked when he told me that the categories had been narrowed down to just 2, and I'm like, the gospel category had up anywhere between 7 to 10 categories at one point. And I was just so shocked because, once again, going back to the past, when the gospel category was first introduced, um, the mother of gospel music, Mahalia Jackson, was the first gospel artist ever to win a Grammy, because she was the first one to break to introduce that category. Because before they introduced the gospel category in the early 60s, all they had was best inspirational performance or best sacred recording. Um, yeah, best sacred recording or best inspirational performance or something like that before they introduced the whole gospel category. And so what they did was they had best gospel performance, best sacred performance, and then best inspirational performance back in the day. And I think they used sacred performance for more classical, or for those people in mainstream who wasn't gospel artists. And the inspirational performance was for those mainstream, or what y'all call secular artists, that recorded gospel cuts or gospel albums. So that's what the way it used to be a long time ago. But there was only one category for gospel for the longest time throughout the 60s, during the early years of the Grammys. They didn't start adding additional categories till like toward the mid 70s, like the early to like the 70s. I do know that. That's when they started having different categories. And the Grammys was kind of slick too, because for those people that don't know, when there used to be record stores, um, when there used to be record stores, there used to be you could tell African American gospel artists from the white gospel artists, or the white artists who sing in the gospel and or Christian category, because when you look for those records, the white artists would be under the Christian music category, or the contemporary Christian category, or the Christian category, or religious category. Anytime you wanted to see find albums and stuff by black people that did gospel, they will be in the category called gospel. You know what I'm saying? That's how they used to do in the record industry. But when the Grammys did it, they did everything up on the gospel. They like best gospel performance, best gospel album, and then they did best soul gospel performance, best soul gospel album, so that you will know that they was talking about blacks that sing gospel, when we know that the whole term gospel comes from the father of gospel music, Dr. Thomas A. Dorsey. So, but anyway, there was a lot of prejudice and stuff going on back in the day, even with the Grammys, even as it relates to gospel. So that's a whole nother history situation in itself. And then they started adding best contemporary gospel album, best traditional gospel album, best southern gospel bluegrass album, best soul gospel traditional, best soul gospel contemporary, best Christian rock album. And then when the whole Christian rap thing came about, they added that category. So they had numerous of categories in gospel, because by the time the late 70s came in, they had at least up to a total anywhere between 6 to 10. From the late 70s going all the way throughout the 90s and throughout the millennium, they had numerous categories, and then they started adding more categories. So I was very shocked to find out that they narrowed the whole gospel category in the Grammys down to 2. And I'm like, somebody in the Grammys slipped up, and many of the gospel artists that are members of the National Academy of Recording Arts and Sciences, I can't understand how y'all let that slip. I'm very disappointed in the commercial gospel recording community at this point, because how did y'all let that slide? Because I kind of feel like, okay, I don't know if Smokey is a member of the Academy of the Grammys. I don't know if he's a member, because the only members can vote. So I don't know if he's a member and stuff like that. But somebody in gospel, some of the legends in gospel, I know that they got to be members, and I know that somebody had to see that. I know some of the gospel producers had to see that. You know what I'm saying? It's very, very strange for people in the gospel music industry to have let that slide like that. That's not cool. I'm very disappointed in that. I'm very disappointed that members of the gospel music community let the Grammys get away with that. Y'all should have noted that they should have been able to pick up on that before the actual award ceremony, because when they first do the first group of nominations, they do the first group of nominations, which is a whole lot of people, and they that are nominated in every category. Then they narrow it down. They narrow it down to the best, anywhere between the best three to the best six. They narrow things down because it's got to be a total of anywhere between a minimum of three or four and a maximum of six. So they narrow everything down till they get to the final group of nominations. That's before the actual award ceremony. And so so I think there's a number of votings in the nominations category that happens before they get to the final nominees. Which is going to be on that particular night of the actual award ceremony. So that's what I'm saying. Somebody should have caught that. They should have caught that within the early group of the voting of the nominees when they got ready to narrow things down. Somebody should have caught that, and somebody should have said, "Wait a minute, where's the rest of the gospel Grammy categories? Why y'all nominated? Why y'all went down to just two? What's going on?" So somebody that's really supposed to be standing up and representing the gospel music industry as it relates to the National Academy of Recording Arts and Sciences, aka the Grammys, somebody dropped the ball, and that needs to be dealt with. Because if that should have been dealt with before the night of the Grammys. Smokie Norful would have never had to make a statement. He himself, who won a Grammy in the category of best contemporary soul gospel performance. You know what I'm saying? And keep in mind, they had best contemporary soul gospel performance for male and for female, and for the album. And they had that for best traditional soul gospel performance album, male, female. They even had best gospel album by a choir or a chorus. They even had that category. So all of the gospel choirs was able to get some love. So I don't get it. And yes, in the past we have had, especially in the 80s, we have had gospel artists to be nominated in the pop categories. For people that don't know their history, Kirk Franklin was the first. Kirk Franklin and Amy Grant, they were the first two gospel artists to have gospel songs nominated as Song of the Year, which had never happened. You know what I'm saying? They were the first two gospel artists to be nominated for Song of the Year. Amy Grant was the first gospel artist to be nominated in the pop category. So we have had that to happen for those people on the contemporary Christian end. Amy Grant, her song Heart in Motion, that album Heart in Motion, because that was a very controversial album that was on A&M Records. And I think the album before that, Amy Grant Unguarded, her Unguarded album was another album where she was like, during that time, she was before the Heart in Motion album, Amy Grant was the first to be nominated in the pop music category. And BB and CeCe Winans, they were, if I'm not mistaken, they were the first gospel artists to be nominated in the R&B categories before Kirk Franklin. Yeah, BB and CeCe Winans was the first to do that. Because even though by that time, even though Reverend Al Green and Tremaine Hawkins and the Winans had crossover hits and stuff like that with their things, with their stuff, but they was always nominated in the gospel categories. You know what I'm saying? And Take Six, they were the first to win a Grammy in the jazz category as well as the gospel categories because of their style of music. You know what I'm saying? They were gospel artists, but they was able to win Grammys in both the gospel categories as well as in the jazz categories for the song Spread Love. That was their first one. So there were a lot of artists that, you know, had a chance to make history, if not, you know, if not just being nominated, but actually winning in categories outside of gospel. But that still didn't affect the number of categories that the gospel industry had within the Grammys. So, and I'm hoping that I'm not rambling, but I just want to make sure that people understood the history. That you know, a lot of people probably didn't like what Smokie Norful had said, but he actually brought some attention to what was going on, and he wasn't trashing Tori Kelly or trashing Kirk Franklin. And I wish I had the info in front of me to where I can actually read what he said. But for those people that want to find out what he said, just look up you know, Smokie Norfolk's comments about the Grammys 2019, and you will find out what he said and stuff like that. But I want to give a shout out to Laurel Lynn for actually talking about this and bringing that to my attention, because me being a gospel music you know, media personality, and you know, consider myself a gospel music historian to some degree, and being a big fan of gospel music, I'm like, I was very disappointed that the gospel music industry would allow the Grammys to drop the ball like that. You know what I'm saying? That y'all should not have done that. And so I want to find out, what is the gospel music industry going to do about it for next year's Grammys? You know, how are they going to correct that? We need to start talking about that. So I want to get y'all comments about this video, what I just talked about, and what you all's thoughts about what the Grammys did, and the shade that was shaded, the shade that the Grammys did to the gospel music industry. You know what I'm saying? You know, not just on the contemporary Christian side, but on the soul gospel side. So let me know your thoughts. You know, I think something something needs to be done about it, and I think the gospel music industry, the Christian community, you know, on the music end, in the music industry part, I think y'all dropped the ball. I'm very disappointed in the gospel music industry right now, because y'all should have been able to catch that before the award ceremony even happened. So yeah, let me know your thoughts at the bottom, you all. And once again, thank you so much for tuning in to A Squared Visual Media Channel, the official video channel for May Entertainment, which is also the home of Rare Productions, our gospel music division, and you know, May Records and all of that stuff. So thank y'all so much for your support. Once again, if you want to utilize our services and stuff like that, and if you want to support us, our Cash App is $ Maycorp USA, MAECORP as in Paul USA. So just support us and stuff like that, because we need your support to stay consistent with our radio shows, to preserve the legacy of gospel music, to preserve the stuff that we're doing that relates to our history, Black history, as well as in other arenas. So follow me on Facebook, facebook.com/MAE Executive. I think that's me. Or you can just look me up, Miko A. Evans, on Facebook, and that's how you can find me, okay? Yeah. And also follow our May Corporation USA page on Facebook. Follow our gospel division page, which is Rev Productions, Inc. Facebook.com/REV Productions with an S, INC. Okay, that's Facebook.com/Rev Productions, Inc. for our gospel division. You can follow everything that we do as it relates to our gospel division, all right? Leave your comments below and support our YouTube channel and support what we're doing to preserve the legacy of gospel music and in other arenas.